Conspiracy theories, eh? Wait till you get a load of this. Hello, and welcome to Crack's Sisters Conspiracies. We're a podcast that covers conspiracy theories, mysteries, and all over spooky shit. My name is Cassandra.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are said sisters.
Hello.
What's up? It's Monday, which seems to be our resident recording day because
we always get it together.
We always have dreams of the weekend and it just never comes to fruition.
It doesn't.
Yeah, you were dead tired yesterday. I was manic with my crackhead energy. I was organizing all the things. Like I was up in my closet, pulling shit down that I hadn't used since I moved in 5 years ago. So I'm like, if I don't need it, I'm throwing it away. I threw away so much stuff.
That's nice. Cathartic.
It was. And like I cleaned out my t-shirt drawer, the drawer in my dresser that's just full of years worth of t-shirts. And I'm like, I wear this many out of all of them. And so Grayson went through it with me and ended up stealing a bunch of my shirts. But I'm like, good. And so she repurposed a few. And then the ones that I was going to get rid of, I think I'm going to make a t-shirt quilt out of them.
Okay.
Because I'm still emotionally attached to some of them, but I'm like, I'm not going to wear this or that shit's falling apart. So I think that's going to be
fun.
A project that I might get to one day.
I've tasked Mom with making Alex and I a quilt. So we haven't been able to figure out what we want our welcome book or whatever it's called to be.
That you have like people sign and shit?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were toying around with the possibility, like we have these big pictures in our house of us. So maybe like having people sign the picture, and we might still do that. But I saw this Instagram video of someone that they just put out, I don't know, 2x2 or something squares of different colors.
Aww.
And then everyone can sign it or draw a picture or write something. So I sent it to Mom. I'm like, hey, would you want to make us a quilt? And she's like, I guess. I'm like, cool, you're doing that. So that's what we're going to do.
Well, I mean, if you are dealing with the squares, so if Mom doesn't have to do like cutting and shit, that's a huge part of it. So yeah, if you give her the finished squares, and it's still a pain in the ass to sew them and quilt it all together, but it's less work.
Oh, that's good then.
Yeah, I actually think that idea is very cute. I also feel like you would end up with a lot of dicks drawn on it. Just
totally fine.
But that would very much sum up,
our relationship. Yes.
Yeah, who you guys are. I had people in my house on Saturday, and Mom was like, oh my God, you know people. So thanks for that.
What people were in your house?
We invited the football family that we kind of clicked with over the last couple of seasons. We invited them over to come swimming after we had stopped by to check out their lemonade stand, which was essentially like a farmer's market in their driveway, because they were selling like loaves of homemade sourdough bread and their eggs from their chickens. Like the kids made like $400. So
that's right. I know. You need to do one of those.
But I was like, why don't you come over and go swimming? And then of course my child browbeat me and then got the other kids to be like, can we come see your cat, please? And I'm like, oh my God, fine. And so the circus came into the living room, but they very quickly left.
Oh, that's good.
So it was fun, but that sapped every last bit of energy that I had on Saturday. So.
And then you went crackhead on Sunday. So
I did. Yeah, I really made up for it. I've been sleeping in a little bit later the last couple of months. Like I can sleep until like 8 o'clock on the weekends. Oh my God. It's life-changing. The amount of... I know. Well, I get like 5 hours of sleep during the week. So getting 10 hours of sleep is just miraculous. I love it. Oh my God.
Oh, good.
But yeah, so those are the exciting things going on in my life.
Wow. Calm it down.
Do you remember what my topic is for today?
Yes.
Yes. And I don't know why I thought of it, but it must have been on like TikTok or something that made me think of it. But I'm sure it's something that most people are aware of, especially if you had any interest in psychology, because you would have touched upon it in some like psychology class in school. Yeah. But I'm going to be covering the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Ooh.
Which was kind of fucked up.
Yes.
So, what is the experiment? The
Mhm.
Stanford Prison Experiment was a psychological experiment that took place in 1971, and it was structured to be a 2-week simulation of life in a prison environment. And so the goal of the experiment was mainly to observe the different effects of a bunch of different situations that these people were exposed to and kind of make note of their reactions and their behaviors throughout the process.
Mhm.
So the experiment was conducted by a man named Philip Zimbardo, who was a psychology professor at Stanford University. And he's the one who led the research team that administered the study.
Okay.
And I think I had mentioned in the previous episode that I had gone to school with somebody who had the same name, not even
Yes,
just
that's
last
right.
name. And even though it was like not even remotely possible for it to be the same person because I wasn't even born until like 16 years later,
Mhm.
for a split second, I was convinced that it was him. But now I always associate these two things.
Well, yeah, they have the same name.
Right? That's very funny. But can't imagine I'm the only one who does that now. So that sucks for you.
Did you like look him up on social media?
The one that I know?
Yeah.
No, I have not looked him up recently. I haven't seen him in years,
You're
but
missing out.
I don't imagine that he's changed much since the last time I saw him. But that's like an unfortunate association. And then I also know someone whose birthday is 9/11. So
That's
like,
what I was gonna say. It's also sucks for anyone who, was born on
yeah.
9/11.
And from what I've witnessed, it does suck. So all right. So all of the participants in the experiment were volunteers that had been recruited from the local community around Stanford University via a newspaper ad, which times have changed quite a bit. I don't even know if they still do help wanted ads and shit in the paper or if that's more like Facebook and Craigslist and stuff.
Assume they probably do. I haven't looked at a paper and I don't know how long.
I don't really read the local paper, or if I do, I'm reading it online. I'm not reading a physical copy. And sometimes, like, we get the Wall Street Journal in the office, but there's no like local help wanted ads there. But even then, like, I would be pretty leery of any of those that I came across in this day and age.
Yeah, it's probably just like Indeed and shit or Facebook, like you said.
Yeah, but because I would 100% be concerned that I would get murdered if I just volunteered for an experiment that I read about in a paper.
But those were super big. Like, even the medical experiments where it's like, we'll pay you $200. Yeah, your hair might fall out and you might burst into flames, but it's $200 cash. And people were like, okay.
I remember being young and broke and considering that. Like, there was a hot minute where I'm like, maybe I should sell my eggs. I'm really glad I didn't, though.
Oh, yeah, I know. You can get a good amount of money. I did try to sell plasma, and then they're like, you're anemic. You're denied. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I just haven't eaten because I don't know what the protocol is. And I spent like fucking half my day and I was really pissed.
Yeah, that's a bummer. But I would not volunteer for anything like that now. Now, as far as the ad goes, they specifically were seeking male students, so men only, who wanted to participate in a psychological study of prison life. That's pretty much all the ad said. It was very vague. It didn't give any information beyond that. It stated that it was expected to last 1 to 2 weeks in duration, and they were being offered $15 per day, which in today's dollars is the equivalent of about $116 a day. So, I mean, it's not nothing. I don't know if it's worth it.
Knowing what I know now, no. Back then, I could fall for that.
I mean, that seems like a quick buck because you don't know what is involved. It seems like easy money on the surface. A total of 75 men had responded to the ad, most of which were, unsurprisingly, healthy middle-class white men. And from there, they were then subjected to different psychological assessments to ensure that they were mentally stable and of sound mind. And then they were also screened to ensure that if any of them had a criminal background, any psychological like impairment or medical condition, they were excluded. So then that narrowed it down to about 24 participants. And of those 24, they were randomly assigned a role. So there were 2 roles that these people could be. You can either participate as a prison guard or you could participate as a prisoner, but they had no choice. And of those 2 groups, there were 9 primary people and then 3 substitutes. So like 9 guards with 3 backups, 9 prisoners with 3 backups.
Got it.
One thing to note, there was a review of the experiment done years later in like 2008, and they had made note of common traits amongst the people who had volunteered to participate. And this kind of gives you a glimpse of what the outcome of the experiment was going to be. But those common traits that were shared between all of these men were aggression, right-wing authoritarianism, Machiavellianism, social dominance orientation, low dispositional empathy, altruism, and narcissism. So those were all high in those who volunteered for this experiment.
Okay.
So on the surface, what role do you think you would want to play if you were given a choice? The guard, right?
Obviously.
Yeah. Like, I feel like most people would want to be the guard, unless you're like one of those glutton for punishment. You want to be
dominated,
debased, and degraded.
What would you
maybe they just wanted to test their own mettle to see if they could like survive in prison.
Yeah, possibly.
But I know that would not be me.
Well, everyone, I'm sure at least once in their lives thinks about what it would be like if you were sent to prison for whatever it may be. Maybe
sure.
Maybe you finally snapped and killed someone. I don't know. But everyone thinks about it. So like that would be a good controlled environment, I guess, to explore that in. I still wouldn't want to do it. But
I wouldn't either. But yeah, in a controlled, well thought out and executed experiment.
Not the way this story goes. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll talk about the prison setup because, again, it's a mock prison. They didn't use a real prison.
Yeah.
So the environment that the experiment was to take place in was constructed in the basement of the Stanford Psychology Building, and it consisted of mock prison cells that measured 7 feet by 10 feet. So, I mean, not huge. And in those 7 foot by 10 foot cells, it would accommodate 3 prisoners each.
Oh.
So when you think about how small that space is and then add 3 grown men to it.
It doesn't sound great.
No. And then they were provided each with a cot that had a mattress, a sheet, and a pillow.
Yeah.
There was a closet, like a literal closet that they used for solitary confinement.
Oh,
There was a small corridor that acted as like the prison yard, so where they can like move around and stuff. And then there was a much larger room directly across from where the prisoner cells were, and that was to be used for the guards and the warden.
Okay.
So to kind of give you an idea of what the setup was like.
I retract my answer. I want to be the warden.
That was not an option.
I know, but I want that one.
But obviously the, boss hog, that would be fantastic. So the prisoners were confined in their small shared cells all day and all night for the entirety of the experiment.
Oh, they didn't even get to go outside for an hour?
They got to go into that little corridor that they called the prison yard. And then like they had access to a traditional bathroom, but that was it. They didn't get to leave, and they had to stay there throughout the entirety of the experiment. They couldn't go home. They had to live in the cells. The guards, on the other hand, they got to stay in a much larger area designated specifically for them. They also had access to special areas where they can go rest and sleep if they wanted. And then they would rotate shifts. So they would have 3 guards at a time working an 8-hour shift. And so they had 3 different shifts that they rotated through.
Yep.
And the guards also had the option to leave and go home if they wanted to at the end of their shift.
So like a real life prison.
Like a real life prison. Philip Zimbardo, the one who was leading the whole thing, he had made himself the superintendent of the whole experiment. And then one of the undergraduate research assistants named David Jaff, he's the one who acted as the warden.
Okay.
And his behavior was actually a point of discussion years later in 2017, because there was digitized recordings of the experiment that had been posted to a website for Stanford. And it showed his attempt to influence the behavior of some of the guards by trying to get them to be bigger assholes and to be more authoritative and really exert their dominance and power over the prisoners, which is a big no-no when you're
fucking with the results of the experiment.
Exactly. And so that was one of the big points of contention with this, because it wasn't a true experiment, because there weren't control factors, and because the ethical lines were blurred so bad.
Whoopsie.
A big whoopsie. So prior to the experiment starting, the guards attended an orientation and they had received instruction on what their role was, along with their guard uniform that they had to wear, which is essentially khakis, but
Yakkies.
khakis. They were told that their main goal was to keep the prisoners from escaping while also maintaining law and order in prison. But ultimately, they were told to really lean into their role of being a guard and to make the prisoners feel like they were truly in prison. So that right there was one of the things that they cited as why it wasn't a legitimate experience.
Yeah, you're already putting things in their head.
That's exactly it. So instead of saying, okay, here is the very bare bones foundation, you're a guard, they're a prisoner, have at it. It's you're a guard. This is what we expect you to do. So they were already influencing the behavior, as we'll see, just kind of went a little hard left. They were instructed not to physically harm the prisoners, and they were not allowed to withhold food or water as punishment. So these are the parameters that they had to work within. To add some additional flair, the guards were given wooden batons to, really have that image of dominance. And they also wore mirrored sunglasses in an attempt to avoid eye contact and kind of maintain anonymity. So they're just seen as this being, not a person.
Yeah.
They were also to refrain from getting to know the prisoners. So no chit chat, no hey, how's it going? Don't treat them as people. And they also were discouraged from having them refer to the prisoners by their names and instead had to call them by their numbers that they were assigned.
Inmate number, yeah.
So really just removing the whole you're a person factor.
Yeah.
So now we'll chat about the execution of the experiment. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it was supposed to take place over a 2-week period of time. But in reality, it was a much shorter duration. The faux prison was constructed on a Saturday. It was August 14th, 1971, with the first day of the experiment commencing the next day. So that's Sunday, August 15th. Those that were assigned the prisoner role had been arrested by local Palo Alto police at their homes or the other locations that they were known to be. And this was in an attempt to add some authenticity to the experience. But it's also worth noting that the prisoners had no idea that that was going to happen.
Oh, gosh.
They were all arrested out in broad daylight, removed from their homes, and they were being charged with armed robbery and burglary were the 2 charges that were being thrown at these people. And again, they had no idea, which is also one of the other ethical violations. That's huge. But it was stipulated in the ethics within the contract that Zimbardo had all of these prisoners sign that stuff like that wouldn't happen. And he directly violated it on the first day that it started. So between the orientation and day 1, he was just failing out the gate.
Yeah.
The only good thing that I can think of is, at least as far as the charges go, at least they didn't make them murderers or chomos or anything.
Yeah. That is true.
Because that, I think, would weigh on their mental health a little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree.
They also went through the full booking procedure at the police station. So they read them their Miranda rights. They took their fingerprints, some mug shots and everything. There was a reporter for a local newspaper who knew that the experiment was happening. So they were tipped off onto what to expect. So they had been following along in their car, taking video of these young men getting arrested, and they had no idea. The prisoners were then taken to the mock prison in the back of squad cars with, full sirens to draw attention to them, to kind of add an additional layer of shame on their way.
Yeah.
And to add even more so to the realness of it, the prisoners were all strip searched at the prison.
That's what I was going to ask.
And then they were assigned their inmate identification number and a uniform. So just really tearing them down. And then the uniforms that they gave them were like a step up from a potato sack. Like they were super uncomfortable. They didn't fit right. They were not provided with underwear, so they had to freeball it in this awful fabric. So I'm sure there was a lot of chafing involved.
Yeah. Jeez.
And they also had like an old-timey chain that was attached to one of their ankles.
Like at all times?
Yeah. And so they made it all the way through booking and strip searching and everything. They were greeted by the warden, who essentially was like, "You're all pieces of shit. Welcome." And just kind of laid it on thick to break them down a little bit more and then sent them off to their assigned cells.
Yeah, Jesus.
By the wee hours of just the second day, so we're maybe 24 hours into this thing, the prisoners were already over it. They were so done with the bullshit.
Yeah.
The guards had tried to rouse the prisoners at 2:30 in the morning by whistling and hitting their batons on the cells. And in response, the prisoners refused to leave their cells to go get food in that little prison yard corridor. They ended up ripping off the ID name badges that were sewn into their uniforms. And they started hurling yo mama jokes at the guards and were just insulting them because fuck you, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And then as a counter, the guards then responded by spraying the prisoners down with a fire extinguisher.
Oh my God.
That shit is super cold. I don't know if you remember watching Tremors 2, but there was a scene where Earl had coated himself down to they were heat seeking so they could sense thermal heat. And so he needed to cool himself down to hide from the shriekers, which is not the same as ass blasters, which if you haven't seen the third one, if you haven't seen any of the
You're the first, bro. I didn't watch any of these sequels.
I'm like, if this doesn't make sense to you, you're really missing out. That is a whole niche thing that was a core part of my development, the original Tremors, but I watched all the other ones too. You should check them out. I think they're on Netflix.
Good.
So back to the guards. They're treating people like shit. They had already had to tag in 3 of the backup guards, or the 3 backup guards that they had, to help regain control of all of the prisoners that were like, fuck this.
Yeah.
And they had done so by taking away the prisoners' clothes. So they were naked. They took away their mattresses and their sheets and all of that. And they subjected the primary prisoner instigators, so the ones who initially were like, no, thank you, them go in the hole, which, if you remember, is just a single closet that they used for solitary confinement.
Yeah. Did the prisoners have like a safe word?
No.
If they wanted the experiment to end?
No. And it was noted, I mentioned it later, they were told that they could leave anytime they wanted, but it doesn't seem like that was really adhered to.
Yeah.
And so they really went in like, you're committed, you're locked in, you're stuck here. And so all of this has taken place just by the second day. And this is supposed to last for 2 whole weeks. So off to a great start. By the third day, so, we're 36 hours in or so, psychological warfare started to come into play by the guards. Okay. And so they started to break down the prisoners into groups of good prisoners and bad prisoners. Okay. And I am a gold star motivated person. I don't know about you, but I was always teacher's pet. I always wanted to be the one that could do no wrong. And so you best believe that I would have been a good prisoner for what
I would have been a bad prisoner.
So we likely would have eventually turned on each other. So those that fell into the good camp, they got their clothes and their mattresses back, while those that were bad remained naked, had all of their stuff taken away. And also the bad prisoners were denied food, which, if you recall, that was one of the stipulations. They are not allowed to take away food and water, but they did in very short order. And so they really leaned into the abusive power thing and would humiliate the prisoners, force them to overexert themselves, doing all of the push-ups. And they also made them shit in buckets because they removed access to the traditional bathrooms for the bad prisoners. And it was, a shared bucket in the cell. So they all had to just shit together. So just 3 days in, prisoner number 8612 snapped and had a full-on mental breakdown. And one of the research assistants then decided to release the prisoner from the experiment because it went a little south very quickly. And so they're like, oh shit, well, he's out. Let's rotate another one in. When day 4 rolled around, things between the prisoners started to break down even further. like I said, the separation of the good prisoner versus
Mhm.
bad prisoner started to bubble up. And so the prisoners started to avoid each other,
Mhm.
but then they started to actively take out their aggression on each other after a while. They turned on each other, and it was starting to take a toll on all of them mentally. And prisoner number 819 began having an identity crisis. He was having a hard time separating his true self from this prisoner role that he was forced into. And he was like truly believing that he had done something wrong and that he deserved to be there, and just completely lost his shit. So he eventually got pulled from the experiment too. But on his way out, as the guards were taking him away, they're like, okay, prisoner 819, he was a really bad guy. He did so many bad things, and just like really painted, him
Oh my
awful
gosh.
light. So he had gone on to do like interviews and write a book about his experience, and it sounded awful, and I felt really bad.
Poor guy. I would sue the fuck out of Zimbardo
Right?
and everybody.
Day 5.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be more fun because they had scheduled visitations with friends and family like they have in normal prison, but I'm sure you can guess how that went.
Yeah.
The visitors had to wait a super long time. So they were purposely being delayed being able to see the prisoners, and only 2 people per prisoner were allowed to visit. And so it traditionally like parents that came to, and when they were able to actually see the prisoners, they were only allowed to interact for 10 minutes before they had to leave. And it was noted that a good deal of the parents had come out of the visit super uncomfortable. They were growing really concerned, and some of them were generating plans to contact lawyers based on the treatment of
good.
kids in the experiment. Phil Zimbardo, he had some colleagues come by too, like, hey, this is the experiment that I'm working on. Why don't you come check it out and see how it's going? And as soon as these people observed what was going on, the alarm bells were just going up. And ethical alarm bells, because they're like, we're scientists and you're dealing with psychological issues. This is people
warfare.
You're doing some fucked up shit.
Yeah.
And there's like a lack of caring and oversight of the whole thing. And the entire study was deemed super immoral by his friends and colleagues. And one woman who had come to visit, she even noted how much Phil Zimbardo himself had changed by acting in that superintendent, like God role, essentially. Fortunately, it was because of her feedback that he was like, oh shit, maybe it got a little out of hand. Maybe I'm in too deep. So on the 6th day, everyone was rounded up so they could be made aware that the experiment was ending prematurely and they would be paid for their 6 days of participation. And then they all had to do like an exit interview, like a one-on-one with Philip Zimbardo, which I would not want to do, first off, after you subjected me to all of this.
Yeah.
And then they had everyone come together in a group setting to like talk about what happened, and then they like sent them on their way, and then they were all supposed to like trickle back in like days, weeks later, just for a mental checkup. But a lot of people were like, no thank you, I'll just take my money and leave and try to repair my broken psyche.
I'm gonna go to therapy with this couple $100 that you gave me.
So the results of the experiment were flawed at best, and it was clear that the guards, having assumed the leadership roles with encouragement from the researchers, skewed the results as well as many other things. Other researchers had determined that the experiment was practically impossible for other researchers to accurately reproduce because of the inauthentic and inorganic developments and lack of control that took place. And so the experiment was perceived by many to involve questionable ethics, the most serious concern being that it was continued even after participants were expressing their desire to withdraw from the program.
That shit.
Had all of the mental breakdown. And like I said, despite the fact that they were told that you can leave at any time, they were never actually allowed to do so. The researchers blocked that from actually happening, except in the case of those 2 that went full psycho explosion.
Yeah.
The only good thing to come out of the experiment is that ethical guidelines for experiments involving people, especially with psychology, are much more rigid.
That's fucking good.
But that's really it.
Oh my gosh.
Now a quick word from our sponsor. Do you live in the Bay Area? Are you in need of a CPR class for work or just to gain the knowledge? Well, look no further, because CPR Education has you covered. They host public classes every Saturday in Pleasant Hill, ranging from CPR and first aid, BLS for healthcare providers, infant essentials for new and expecting parents, and EMSA-approved courses for licensed childcare providers. Whatever need you have, PR Education has a solution. Go to cpredu.com and use code CRACKED for 20% off any public class. That's CRACKED, and you will get 20% off any class of your choosing. CPR Education, keeping people together.
So yeah, that is the Stanford Prison Experiment in a nutshell. And that sounded terrible.
Yeah, it's super interesting. No, but I can tell you that the guards didn't need prompting for that to happen. Maybe it wouldn't have been that extreme, but going through the police academy literally was the worst experience of my life. I would never do it again. And it was 6.5 months. And within the first 2 weeks, it is so crazy, like just how fast everything evolves, how much you change, how much you learn that like, oh shit, I have to do this and get in line or you're punished and like all of this stuff. And the relationship we had as cadets and then, with our staff, that was like such a big power dynamic. And we were fucking terrified of them. And all they did was just harass us all day long, every day. And then finally, at the end, we were like 1 week from graduating. That's when they became real people again. And they were very nice. We got to do a class prank. And our prank that we were going to dress up as staff and we were going to like scream at them and make them do push-ups and do all this stuff. So
oh my God.
We had one female attack officer. So I was her. And literally we did the experiment for like 30 minutes and the power I felt screaming at them, mostly because I was taking out some rage, but I'm like, this could be dangerous. Like, it's very easy to fall into that role of being like a dictator almost and screaming at people because it's fun and it's exhilarating, especially if you've been on the other side of it. And like if they got to flip-flop with prisoners, got to become guards and vice versa, it would be 500 times worse than whatever results they got. But I can definitely see it.
Oh yeah. And like, I've even seen it even at a more benign retail level. When I worked with people, we were on the same level. Like it was people that I was like, oh, hey, you should come work with me. We need help. And so we were both here. And then one of them got promoted. And then just that tiny taste of power. I'm like, you're a fucking dick. And I don't want to work with you ever again. And like, we were friends. What happened?
Yeah. I don't know if it's just basic human instinct to get on a weird power trip when you have it. But yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, so that is the Stanford Prison
That's super
Experiment.
interesting. Yeah.
Any ideas on what your topic? I know we got a couple of recommendations. Thank you, John and Mom. But
yeah, I got a different recommendation from Randy, who's Dad's friend, who listens to us.
Oh, hi, Randy.
And he wants us/me to cover Trump's attempted assassination.
Oh my God.
Whether it happened, whether he actually got shot, whether it was an inside job, who knows? But that is what I will be covering.
Okay. It's funny because that's still a relatively current event.
It is, yeah.
Everything that's happened in the last few weeks since then, it feels like it was years ago.
I know. It feels like it was a really long time ago.
All right. Well, that'll be interesting to cover. Okay. But yeah, as I said, we have a couple other suggestions in the bank, but we are always looking for more topics. So we highly request that you reach out and tell us what you want to hear. You can do so.
Website now, like a real one.
We have a website now?
We do. It's crackedsistersconspiracies.com. And on the website, you can submit a listener suggestion.
Oh my God, that's something new. That's exciting. I didn't
forgot. I didn't tell you about that.
Cool. So we have a website, crackedsistersconspiracies.com.
Yep.
So you can send us a note there. Otherwise, you can reach out to us on our social media, Instagram, send us a DM. We have an X, we have a Facebook, we have a TikTok kind of. I have some more posting I have to do. But we also have a Patreon. So if you throw a dollar here or there at us, you'll get access to the full unedited videos. You get to see our pretty shining faces and you get some extra perks now and again.
You can also become just a free member, just if you want to support us but don't want to give us money. That's totally optional.
You can, and you'll still get access to not everything, but a lot of the content, more than you would just listening to us or checking out our other socials. But yeah, with that, I'm going to say stay cracked, y'all.
And have a great day.